So the American Revolution is over. The good guys won. But for George Washington, you could say the real fight was just getting started. This is the story of how his presidency, the very first one, was defined not by a war against a king, but by an incredible clash of ideas between two brilliant, stubborn guys in his own office, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. I mean, think about it. A new nation was literally born out of nothing. But just existing wasn't enough. It had to survive. And Washington was staring down a mountain of debt, a world that was pretty skeptical about this whole America experiment and, the small task of building an entire government from scratch. No pressure, right?
Washington was a smart guy. He knew he couldn't possibly do this alone, so he put together what people now call a team of rivals. He basically got the smartest people in the country into one room to be his advisors, even if they absolutely could not stand each other. And it was that very conflict that would end up forging the nation.
Now, his first cabinet was actually pretty small. You had Henry Knox handling the military stuff, but the real fireworks, the real power, came from two men, his Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, and his Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. And let me tell you, these two could not have been more different.
And look, this wasn't just about personalities. This was a battle for the very soul of America. Hamilton, on one side, he pictured this powerhouse nation, driven by a strong federal government, with big cities, factories, and merchants. He wanted to be pals with Britain. But then you have Jefferson. He saw America as a nation of farmers, the common man, with power resting in the states, not some far-off capital. And he wanted to be friends with France. This single disagreement, it's going to be at the heart of everything.
So naturally, this huge ideological clash just explodes onto the scene. And the first major battleground? The economy. The country was flat broke, drowning in debt from the war. And the question of how to fix it, well, that just lit the fuse on a really bitter divide.
Hamilton, who is a total financial whiz, comes out swinging with this incredibly bold three-part plan. Step 1, the federal government takes on all the debt, state and federal, and lumps it together. Step 2, they issue new bonds to pay off all the old IOUs. And Step 3, the kicker, they impose federal taxes to pay for it all. For the time, this was a totally radical and super controversial idea.
And the South, they were furious. They completely erupted. Guys like Jefferson looked at this plan and saw a massive giveaway to rich merchants in the North. I mean, many Southern states had already paid off their war debts. Now Hamilton wanted them to pay again to bail out the North? No way.
And this fight over money quickly morphed into a fight over the Constitution itself. Jefferson was what we call a strict constructionist. He believed that if the Constitution doesn't specifically say the government can do something, then it can't, period. So a national bank? Not in the Constitution, so it's illegal. But Hamilton, he was a loose constructionist. His view was, if the Constitution doesn't forbid it, then the government can do it.
Hamilton had a secret weapon, though. It's a little phrase in the Constitution known as the Elastic Clause. It gives Congress the power to pass any laws that are necessary and proper for doing its job. And Hamilton argued that a national bank was absolutely necessary and proper for managing the country's money. And in the end, Washington sided with him.
But Hamilton wasn't done. His next move was a tariff, a tax on imported goods, which drove the wedge between North and South even deeper. See, the industrial North loved it and made their stuff cheaper, but the agrarian South, which had to import a lot of things, got hit hard. It felt like another win for Hamilton and another loss for Jefferson's vision of America.
Then came the final piece of Hamilton's plan, a 25% tax on whiskey. And this is what really sparked an open rebellion. Farmers out in Pennsylvania, who often used whiskey like cash, just refused to pay. They attacked tax collectors. So what happened? Washington himself, the president, personally led an army of 13,000 soldiers to put down the rebellion. The message was crystal clear. This new federal government was here to stay, and it was going to enforce its laws.
Okay, so the government has flexed its muscles at home, but now it's facing its next huge test, a world at war. The French Revolution had kicked off, and this, of course, started another massive fight between the pro-France Jefferson and the pro-Britain Hamilton.
France came calling for help. They basically said, hey, we helped you during your revolution, so it's time to return the favor. Jefferson was totally on board, but Hamilton was pumping the brakes, worried about messing up trade with Britain. Washington had to make a call, and he did. He issued the Proclamation of Neutrality. America wasn't picking sides. And that decision, right there, would guide American foreign policy for more than 100 years.
But being neutral didn't exactly mean being safe. Britain started acting out. They began seizing American merchant ships, kidnapping American sailors and forcing them to serve in the Royal Navy. They even started giving weapons to Native American tribes to attack settlers out west. The U.S. and Britain were right on the brink of another war. Washington knew another war would be a disaster, so he turned to diplomacy. With Jay's Treaty, he got the British to back off their forts in the Northwest and stop seizing ships. And with Pinckney's Treaty, he settled the southern border with Spain and, this is huge, got the U.S. access to the Mississippi River and the port of New Orleans. He had steered the country through the storm without firing a single shot.
Now, all these constant battles, they weren't just personal arguments. They were actually the birth of something that George Washington absolutely dreaded: political parties. And that brings us to his parting warning. What had started as just factions and disagreements hardened into America's first real political parties. You had Hamilton's Federalists, who wanted a strong national government, squaring off against Jefferson's Democratic Republicans, who fought for states' rights. The battle lines that had been forming for years were now officially drawn.
Washington was so disturbed by this growing division, he reluctantly served a second term because he felt the country needed him, but he flat out refused a third. And in doing so, he set this powerful two-term precedent that would last for 150 years.
In his famous farewell address, Washington gave a stark warning. He talked about the baneful effects of the spirit of party. He was genuinely afraid that loyalty to a party, instead of loyalty to the nation, could tear the whole fragile republic apart.
So, the father of his country, the man who started it all, was afraid that political parties could be the thing that destroyed it. Just think about that for a second, and look at the world we live in today. I'll just leave you with this question. Was he right?